Welcome back to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brennan Catuli. We are here today for episode number 38 with Craig Lewis. Craig is one who has built his life on the foundations of gratitude, peace, love, kindness, and spirituality. Craig aims to educate through truth and honesty within his own personal experiences, what he's done within the field of mental health personally, as well as within the workplace and within training others to become mental health professionals. Craig recently published his book, Better Days, which is available in many different languages such as Dutch, Spanish, Italian, and much more. You can look in the show notes to see where you can buy this book as well. We're going to be having a giveaway for Craig's book very shortly. Craig actively trains mental health workers, educators, people in recovery throughout the whole world, and he is excited to benefit your own organization if you need it, or your own self if you're on the mission of recovery. Check the show notes to learn more about Craig. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Craig, as it is one of the most raw and honest approaches to what's going on within the mental health field today. He currently resides within the mountains in Mexico. Thank you all for listening to this episode with Craig Lewis. Thank you for listening to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brennan Catuli. We are here today for episode number 38 with Craig Lewis. Craig, thank you for taking the time out with me. It's such a pleasure to connect with you, and I'm so excited to learn more about what you've been able to overcome and what you've been able to learn within the field of mental health. So thank you for being here on the Mental Insights Podcast today, Craig.
Thank you for having me, Brendan. I'm extremely honored to be here with you, and I'm blessed to be alive today to share all that I know with you and your listeners.
That is so awesome to hear. Just by speaking with you for these past few minutes, I feel your energy and I feel your true passion and gratitude towards this field. To start off in, such a large field within mental health, the one question that I love to really get the conversation going with my guests is to just ask, when did you first learn about the importance of mental health and learn how crucial of an aspect it was within your own life?
It's a funny question and a not so funny answer. And the answer is I came into this work not by my own choosing, as far as my introduction to what it meant to discuss and work on what mental health is for both myself and others. I am most certainly a person whose introduction to mental health was via force and abuse. And so I come into the working community from a place of personal lived experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Craig. Before we really dive into the topics within mental health, I think, a good question to have is, what was kind of the change in perspective as, you said you were forced into the conversation of mental health, but now you're a very big advocate and proponent on focusing on your mental health. So, whether it's what changed your perspective or, how is the difference in perspective from start to now that you're being such a big advocate for mental health today?
My introduction to mental health was via force. And it was via force because, in fact, my parents were not well. And so my experience, both as a person receiving mental health care and also as a person providing assistance for others, was something that was first brought to me almost, not almost, accurately in abusive ways. And so I didn't become a person who was working in mental health and doing what I'm doing because I chose to go to college with some interest to benefit the world. I was, without question, against my will, forced into something and subjugated as a result of my parents' own unaddressed issues. And that is how, after a very long journey, because I am now 45, although I feel like I'm 22, it has been a very long journey of getting to the point of taking care of myself and bringing the wisdom that I've gained through this experience to the lives of others to the best of my God-given ability.
Thank you so much for that honest answer, Craig. I truly appreciate that. You bring up some wonderful remarks and things that we could really dive deep within. One, obviously, we can strictly speak about the experiences that you had and the challenges that you face, but eventually I do want to really dig deep into your perspectives on the mental health services that are available today, because I do know that you have had some challenges within that area. But really, before we get into that, I do want to speak about trauma, because it's such a large proponent within the field of mental health. Mostly it is sought out within childhood trauma, especially, is what really brings about many of the challenges that people face within mental health. For yourself, as you've had many years to work within different resources, work within yourself to truly heal and overcome some of these traumatic issues as you were a child. As well, for myself, I did deal with some trauma when I was younger, but I was fortunate to have many resources around me at a young age. But for yourself, how can not only yourself, but just how can one heal from traumatic experience, and what are kind of the steps that you went through that some others may need within their resources in order to move forward after a trauma they may have experienced?
Well, thank you for the specific question and for addressing this, both because it's good for me to talk about and it's also good for people to hear. I think we could probably, or most mental health providers should be able to agree that, as you just clarified, trauma is often the root cause or the root issue of what then manifests into what has become a billion-dollar industry. And I think that I guess I can call myself a mental health professional, even though I always laugh at that term. I think that the trauma that people in our society experience it's so prevalent and so absolutely common that we as a society disregard the impact that it has, and we also don't recognize or openly acknowledge that we cause it. We cause the perpetuation of suffering in our societies, and it's a business. And so, if something is a business, then a business model doesn't succeed if you lose your customers. And I think that is my answer, because I know what I know because I was a customer, not by choice, but by force, much like many. And when we recognize that we are a customer we are a source of revenue, then when you're a source of revenue, you either continue to be a source of revenue or you don't. And I chose to no longer be a source of revenue. And by doing that, I began to heal. And by choosing to not participate in a capitalist venture that revolved around my personal well-being that you can't even test me for, and you can't look at me and say, oh, this guy has a broken arm. No, you don't know, actually. You actually don't know why I'm having a hard time if you don't ask, and it's certainly not something that's classifiable by using a book of statistics and a list of qualifying factors to say, oh, this guy is this. No, we can't actually respect that that's real. What we can respect is real, that all people in our society have experienced things that have affected them. And I am an example of a person who experienced a compounded degree of those adverse childhood experiences, while at the same time being denied the validation of the fact that those experiences were legitimately devastating, and instead I was left to just deal with it. And it is that experience that is not uncommon in our society. When we look on the street and we see people suffering and begging, and we just look at them and we say, oh, well, I don't know what you say, and I don't know what other people say, but I know our society views them, like views me, if you will, as being the source of our problem, that we should get a job or we should go see a doctor. Well, let's face facts. Let's face facts. What happened? And something happened to me, and that's what made me me. And that is certainly not my doing. However, what is my responsibility is what I do with it now. So contextually in this conversation, we're talking about, to preface the actual conversation about what I do and what matters in this world to me and why we're having this conversation, to have that foundational understanding that we all have had these things happen to us. And it more so comes down to who's helping you, what are their motivations, why are you in treatment, why are you in care, who benefits, what's the whole entire story. And it is not, and I speak to all the providers out there, it's not just the individual who's sitting in front of you, that they are the entirety of the issue. It's in fact most likely, or I should say at the very least, a 50-50 split of what's causing these issues, and is it from that person within them, or are there other circumstances at play? And when I say it's 50-50, that's being generous. And I thank you for letting me go off on a little bit of a tangent here to explain what I'm feeling and experiencing, but I hope that's acceptable for you.
That certainly is, Craig. I really appreciate you bringing up this, this topic and this perspective. I think a lot of people feel the same way, but do not necessarily have the courage to voice their opinion, such as yourself. I want to go a little bit more in depth into, just your perspective on the way that mental health services are provided today, especially within, the society, within, our communities today. For your own experiences, can you share more about your interactions with the service providers today? I've read a good deal on your own perspective and your own instances. Can you speak a little bit more about better days for the audience, and kind of what are some of the challenges that you've had to face throughout the the connections and communications you have to have within mental health services in our society today, and what challenges are there still in place within the services and the structure that we provide today within mental health services?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm laughing. My experience is not uncommon. And so when I say that my experience has been absolutely devastatingly awful, I'm not alone. I am not alone in any way, shape, or form. And we are living in a hierarchical society, and even amongst people who have had lived experience with trauma and struggles, even in these communities, it's hierarchical, and it's based on class and privilege, where you come from and what you look like and your gender and even your color of your skin. This is a society that we are a part of that judges you based on things that we are indoctrinated into knowing as are, as a fact, from birth. When you are born in the United States of America, and even if you were born into a poor family or you're born into poverty, you are still raised in a society that is based on capitalism. And what does that mean? It means that we are taught from birth, even if you're growing up in severe poverty, excuse me, we are taught from birth that it is acceptable because we are taught by the TV and then our families teach us this as well in our schools. We are taught that injustice is acceptable for some and that justice is not for everybody. And it is based on factors that as a child we cannot possibly understand. However, when we are taught that these factors are in place, we don't have the capacity as young people to know the difference. And if we do have the capacity to know the difference, such as I did as a a boy, right, growing up in a wealthy Jewish family, which is prominent family, it is a near death sentence to speak about it. And I come from a place in which I have gotten myself in a lot of trouble from a young age because I simply saw what was happening around me, and that wasn't acceptable for people who had things to maintain. And that just doesn't apply to my family. It's applied in the same way to a mental health worker or a psychiatrist or a CEO of an agency or a mental health official in the government. They all have their own families to protect. They all have their own houses to make sure they pay for, and they all have their own futures to kind of invest in. And that once again, as I said a minute ago, that makes me a revenue source. And when you are a revenue source, even as we are talking in the context or speaking in the context of mental health care, meaning what is care? Well, make sure someone's okay. Well, if our job is to make sure someone's okay, but first and foremost, we need to keep our job, because if we don't keep our job, then we don't take care of our own needs. I think you understand what I'm saying here is that my experience, both as a person who was a young person, then as an adult working in the field, I don't know that there's any difference. Because I come from a place of subjugation, and I never had a chance to not be in a place of subjugation, that has informed me in my perspective, which is often a perspective that is not particularly appreciated because, as you said a minute ago, not many people have the, I don't remember the word you used, but the something to speak that reality. But why am I able to speak that reality and that truth without consequence? Well, let me be clear. There is a consequence to all of this. But the consequence, much like when you get a bottle of pills from a pharmacy, the consequence in this context is it more beneficial? Do I deem it more beneficial to my long-term well-being to accept the consequence or the risk by speaking the truth or by not? And so my choice, just like a person who goes to the pharmacy and picks up a bottle of pills and they read and says, your doctor has deemed this beneficial to you despite the potential harm. It is a similar thing, except it is reality and it's real life. And it's my daily experience and my daily existence. And thus, my choice is to live in that place of truth, and knowing that by living in that place of truth, that others, the right people, will see that and embrace, and I can choose to discern between those people and allowing them into my life, and then know that there are others who do not feel comfortable with that, and to try to let them go, try to not have a negative impact come to my life as a result of being affiliated with or associating with, etc., with those who come from a place where, well, if you don't do certain things, you don't have a job, you don't have a home. Well, frankly, I haven't had a home for so long. I do now thank the heavens. And so I know what it's like personally. And thus, my decisions are informed from a foundation of knowing and seeing clearly, and knowing that there is a punishment for speaking what you know with clarity. Like, even what I'm saying here, there are people listening, or who will be listening, who, although they know that I'm saying is on point, they're going to have a hard time promoting that as their own perspective. They might not want to share this thing and share this podcast, say, hey, everyone, listen to what this guy's saying. He's speaking up the truth. Maybe they can't share it because, well, if I'm speaking this truth and you identify with it, how is that going to impact your life and your career? So I find myself in this funny position where I can say whatever I want, and as long as it's rooted in truth, which I have to have it be rooted in truth because that's my ticket to freedom, that's my ticket to safety, that's my ticket to success, because people respect that. People are afraid of it, but also people respect it, and that allows me to have a life.
I truly commend you for that, Craig. I really appreciate your honesty and courage to share this. I completely agree with you, and I think so many out there do within the context of services and within the relationships and connections that they have within seeking out services. I completely agree with you that many people probably won't feel empowered or strong enough to share this due to that, that perception that they might not be accepted or that it might not be a view that is, attributed to within this field. I think if everybody who is experiencing this could share their own opinion, I think a large percentage would be on your side because there's so many challenges and so many different ways that there are, wrongdoings within this field that many don't really open up to and become aware about. I think there was many different, instances back when, this industry was really coming into play of, servicing others through mainly medication. And, that's really where this, transpired, theory of, creating it to be a business and creating it to live in this, capitalistic society. I think you also brought up a great point in terms of just the impact that other forces around you can have. So, somebody who doesn't necessarily agree with your opinion can bring in this negativity and this approach that might try to bring you down or, just change your own perception of how you see your own truth, which I love that you continue to embody. I think honesty is one of the best approaches in any conversation because then you never have to forget what you say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, if you stick to the truth, then no one can really use your stuff against you. They can try. And additionally, I'm going to admit something to you right here. Man, it's easier for me to tell this truth to the whole world. And I want to be, I have a sailor's mouth, so I got to be careful here because I want to respect, I don't want you to have a bleep here, so I'm going to try to be clean. I'm absolutely crazy. I love being me. I love the fact that I am not like other people. I love the fact that I have a different perspective. I love the fact that I have, I don't care what society thinks. And I love the fact that I'm a free person who's going to speak his truth, and I'm going to stand up for what's right in the face of consequence. I've always been like that. And by being a person who's, if you appreciate in our society, you hear how I am, you've acknowledged this is what I'm about before I even just made this most recent statement about this. If you lived a life like this, you're going to take a lot of abuse because then others don't consider it as abuse. They consider it as self-preservation. They don't realize that what one considers self-preservation, another experiences as abuse. And I think part of what propels me is the reality that I am a product of abuse, including being a product of abuse as, I'm going to say it for what it is, as perpetrated by the mental health system. And so the breaking point for me was also the beginning for me. And the breaking point for me, and to specifically answer your question, with context to then really give you the answer that you're seeking from me, was recognizing that life up until a certain point, as I knew it, was untenable to continue, and to move forward in a way that would result in peace and happiness and stability and success and wellness and beauty, like all the things that people who are experiencing challenges and difficulties are seeking. And it was that breaking point in which I had to face myself and investigate within myself, do I want to continue to live the life that I was living, which was unsatisfying, unfulfilling, broken existence, or did I want to find a way that would allow me to somehow, in some way, tap into what had happened to me? And I clearly state that this is something that happened to me. This was not organic. This was a result of trauma and abuse and mistreatment. And that is what was truly the catalyst, the catalyst for me investing myself in doing good in the world. It was the fact that I knew how bad it could be. I knew how abusive things could be. And I knew that I had one chance in this world to have a life with all that I had been experiencing. And that chance was to take what I know or take what I learned and build something with it. And although I think that I've often come across as selfish because I'm a person who had very little to begin with and struggles immensely with a lack of resources because of my experience, I had no choice but to invest myself regardless and to build something from the bottom up, from the ground up. I think that's also something that many people in our field, if you want to call it that, may not necessarily come from a place of absolute bottom. And that's where I come from. And so my perspective is extremely beautifully informed from knowing what it means to be on the bottom and to be viewed as a bottom person. Or, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. To be viewed as the lowest common denominator on the scale of human value, including being a person working in the mental health care field. I still experience that. And so that is my driving force, to make sure that people like me who have been so hurt have a voice, and that their voice is heard, and that they are heard, and that they are respected. So that is where I'm coming from, and that is where I'm going. Only higher and higher, ensuring that others like me can also benefit, not just from what I have to offer, but from what they themselves have within them that they can nurture into beauty and success. And so my approach to society, my approach to mental health care, my approach to recovery, my approach to peer support, my approach to being a psychiatric survivor, my approach to being a human being is to speak honestly about what's going on and trusting that truth protects you. Truth protects your well-being. Truth makes it so, while others may not like you, or they may be uncomfortable with who you are and what you are, the truth will give you a cushion with which to exist. And there are consequences to that, and I face them. I face them both with my family. My family disowned me after giving me an ultimatum 2 years ago that I was not to speak about what happened to me as a child. So where was I living when I was a child? There's your answer. And the truth has been in other ways, both professionally and, your podcast is about mental health and addiction and homelessness. I reached out to you because I've dealt with mental health. I don't really have an addiction issue, but I certainly was homeless for 15 months up until recently. And why is that? It's because of truth. It's because when you are a person who has had experiences in this world that others don't appreciate, when you're a person who has had experiences that will cast a negative light on parts of society or people or organizations, despite despite mission statements, if you will, despite the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, despite legalities, human beings will often deviate from what they personally know is correct because they got to make sure that they keep their house. They got to make sure that their kids have clothing and they have electricity. They got to make sure that their car's on the road. They want to think about, what am I going to do next week? I want to go on vacation. I want to have a nice dinner. All of that stuff comes into play when you have a person like yours truly, who it takes not more than a couple of minutes Googling to find out that it's not the first time that I've done an interview like I am here now, saying the same things. So there are some people like yourself, perhaps, and others who treasure and know the inherent value of someone who is fearless and speaking this truth. And then there's others who are terrified by it. And my position on this is just tell the truth. Admit that you're flawed. Admit that you're imperfect. And work together with others in our society for the benefit of all. And you've used this word industry a couple times, which I can't personally. How on earth is helping other people, like with their mental health, in industry? But the fact that we call it an industry, that's more informative than anyone wants to, or that many people want to consider. Why on earth is helping people through healing from their most innermost traumas and pains? How on earth did that become an industry? And it only became an industry when it became profitable. A business model does not succeed when you lose your customers. And if mental health care is an industry, I'm speaking to the CEOs and the executives and big pharma and everyone who's taken an oath to do good and not harm, and everyone who has a mission statement, every organization that has a mission statement that says we believe in social justice and the liberation of people and doing what's right and standing up for the marginalized. That's a business model. And your business model does not succeed when you lose your customers. And that makes it an industry, and you must protect your industry. And if you don't protect your industry, you don't have profit, you don't have income, you don't have a life. And that is my personal experience in working in mental health care, and also being a person who previously was a recipient of what they call mental health care. I, without question, for much of my life, was a dollar sign. And now that I am free and liberated and speaking my truth without restriction, I continue to be a threat to the dollar sign, to the dollars that amount to how you have a car, how you have a house, how you pay for your family's life. I represent somebody who's a threat to all of that because I have lived life with both the tails and the head sides of the coin, with both being the person who previously was the recipient, and thus losing me as a client, if you will, is a financial loss. And now that I have survived all of that, because I'm talking to you now, I'm alive, and with some clarity, I pray is conveyed. I'm now a threat to that same dollar sign. And so, what am I supposed to do? It's like, I don't like the word, D-A-M-N, damn. I don't like that word for personal spiritual reasons. But there's that English language idiom. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So if I am damned if I do and damned if I don't, I'm just going to do what I want to do. And what I want to do is help other people. And I want to reach out to all those people and say, hey, I get it. And what you're experiencing, what you may be experiencing, the things that you don't feel comfortable saying because of the consequence, I paid that consequence. It's terrible. It's awful. It's destructive. And I'm on this podcast with you, Brendan, and I do this on a regular basis because there are millions of people in this world, because there's actually 6.5 billion people out there, most of whom never hurt me. Most of whom never hurt you. Most of whom never hurt anyone that's listening to this. And those are the people that I want to connect with. And if I can separate myself by speaking truth I'm smiling because this is what I do. I'm transparent as can be. If people don't understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it, they're not listening, because I'm telling everybody in clear English exactly what I'm doing. And if you don't hear it, that means you're not listening. It means you're thinking about your response without understanding what's being conveyed to you, which is like it's a cardinal sin of therapy. It's like you don't do it. You don't prepare your response while the person is still communicating. You listen to them, then you process. And our society, and as industry you speak of, is built on responding before listening, which is the antithesis of what we are taught when we go to school for counseling and mental health care. And so I represent somebody who knows that. And there are people who support that and cherish that, and there are people who are afraid of it. And I'm just going to keep on doing this, because the more I do something like this, I'm an easy to get along with guy. But if you're coming at me from I got to protect my industry, I got to protect my income, then I am not someone who's particularly welcome in their life. And I recognize that. And c'est la vie. There's 6.5 other billion people out there who most certainly may be receptive to truth. And I forgive them all for not knowing better, or for people who take steps that are counter the very things that they became mental health care workers for. I forgive them for not knowing, or forgive them for preserving their families. I forgive them for choosing to survive over doing the right thing. It's okay. You're all forgiven. Most people don't get into mental health care to hurt, even though you may hurt. I didn't become a mental health care worker to hurt people, but I certainly am not a perfect person. I certainly have a history of not doing the right thing, including as in my work, because we all have to make decisions. But I'm at the point where I can only live in truth. So what I just shared with you can clearly be deciphered, I believe, by you and others as a true statement, even if it's unpleasant for me to say about myself, because it's true. But it's certainly unpleasant for others to consider about themselves, because they have things to lose. Frankly, I get nothing to lose. I'm sitting in a cheap hotel room with spotty internet, which is why we keep getting cut out, in a dangerous city in Mexico. Why am I here? Why am I here? I'm here because I spoke this truth. And I've been speaking this truth my whole life. And I am the embodiment of what a consequence looks like for doing so. But also, I am the epitome of freedom, because I'm going to go have a day and a life and find my happiness in every moment possible, in defiance of, in spite of, and despite every single thing that's ever happened to me. And so that is reality, whether anyone else likes it or not. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak that, whether anyone else likes it or not. And everyone deserves a good life. And I want to see that happen. That is part of my mission in this world. If that makes any sense at all, that if this is I hope that this not sound disjointed and we're getting cut off because of the signal, so we're getting start and stop, and that's okay. But I hope that what is being heard here is not that this guy's some sort of erratic maniac, but the opposite, that this is a guy who doesn't care about the consequence, because there are people out there who feel like me and experience life like I do, and it's important for them and for the people who provide mental health care services for them, if you will, to know that this is reality as well. And what you learn in school, well, there's a whole other chapter that you've not learned, and I bring that chapter.
I completely agree, Craig, and I commend you for sharing this information. I really appreciate you bringing this perspective, because it truly does change the way people are going to perceive how others are getting services, and as well not getting services. You're speaking about the challenges that we face in a society of having a capitalistic approach to helping others. And it really brings about many different challenges for one such as yourself to, find that balance of truth and of not. And it brings you to seeking out that freedom, which I'm so happy that you are free and understanding in what's best for you as well as what's best for the message that you're pushing towards others who may have the similar experience and situation as yourself. You spoke a lot about the impact of relationships that they can play within your mental health, within seeking out resources, within, providing a negative environment in your own life. I want you to speak about this conversation of gaslighting, because it's not something that's really been brought about within my podcast only once before with a guest, and you've spoken a lot about it within your work. And just share with us, what is gaslighting and what effect can that have on our own mental health?
Well, when we're children and something happens to us and we go seek out help, or we say, someone's hurting us. Oh, really? Oh, I don't believe that. Or they said that was not the case. Or, no, Craig, that can't be true. I mean, your parents are respectable members of society. Huh. That must mean that what I'm experiencing in reality is permitted, and you as the counselor or the psychiatrist or the family friend or the whomever, you're aware that I'm telling you that something's wrong, right? Okay? And you're telling me, well, yeah, but what? What do you mean, but? There's no but. It either is happening or it isn't. And how can you, and you understand what I'm doing here, how can you, as the provider, as the authoritative figure, as the person whose paid job it is, your public role in society, is to advocate for the vulnerable and the marginalized and the hurt and the victimized, how is it that you choose to participate in the perpetuation of abuse? And that is the foundation of how a person can easily be targeted for manipulation. That's where I come from. I come from a long history of being told that despite the truth about my family, that it just wasn't going to be addressed. Then you're abused. Then you're abused publicly. Then you're labeled as a sick person or mentally ILL. I'm like thinking to myself all my life, are you kidding me? I'm reporting that I'm being abused. But because you don't see it, or because you know the people involved, you know my parents, or you know whatever, these people who are not being nice to me, but you don't see that, right? You see them as one way. Does that mean that I am the person who must not be correct? I must be delusional. I must be crazy. Craig's crazy. Oh my God. Yeah. You hear what he said? Yeah, I heard what he said. They don't need to decipher what I said. It's clear. And so what is gaslighting? And how are people gaslighted? It is the denial of one's truth. And then there's the agitation of that person by, whether it's intentional or not, and often it's not, it's the existence of others who have not done the right thing for whatever reason, and forgive them for that because everyone's surviving the best way they can. You can't be angry at people for not doing the right thing, but you can certainly speak about it. You can certainly say, well, you didn't do the right thing. Why don't you address it? But when they don't address it, well, the finger gets pointed back on the person who's been victimized. And I am a person, as I just gave an illustration from my youth and my adolescence and my 20s and my 30s and my work as a mental health provider in my home state, Massachusetts. I'm an example of a person who simply spoke about what was really happening. And, well, if it's to the benefit of others to not validate that, then they will fight to their death to protect that. And that is how gaslighting becomes a thing. That is how you can traumatize somebody, you can psychologically abuse somebody simply by existing and not validating their truth. And when you don't validate someone's been abused, well, that person's not going to get better. That person will get worse. And then we look at them and say, oh, they're mentally, ILL. Oh, they need to be this, or they need treatment. Wait a second. When on earth will you listen to what they're saying and validate them and take action as an advocate? And when all those things don't happen, you are a person like me sitting in a cheap motel in Mexico with shoes that don't have a sole and not knowing exactly how I'm going to eat in 3 days. And at the same time, extremely successful, getting hired all over the world to speak and train, and I have my book in 8 different languages. How is it that I'm sitting in a cheap motel room in Mexico without proper footwear and without proper nutrition? Well, that is I am the embodiment of a person who has been psychologically abused, aka gaslighting, for my truth being told and not being respected. And the first time a person has their truth denied and they react with a naturally human response, having a reasonable response to an unreasonable set of circumstances, if you're in the wrong place or at the wrong time, like there's a mental health worker around of some sort who does not understand that you are a trauma survivor and you're not some sort of violent person on the street who's going crazy, you can end up having your life basically taken from you, whether you're, I don't mean being killed, I mean being like locked up or being like diagnosed and drugged and all this. For what? For simply seeking help? For simply having a reaction to being mistreated? For simply like not understanding why on earth would a society and a community of professionals whose industry, if you want to call it that, is to help people, where is the action? Well, when you shut that door, well, you can't stop that person from banging on that door. And they're going to bang louder and louder and louder. And that's how I ended up being on podcasts like yours. And that's how I've done 3 other podcasts in the past 2 weeks about similar topics. Because when truth transcends that closed door on someone's existence, it's only a matter of time before the gaslighting loses its power. It's only a matter of time when that psychological abuse loses its impact and that individual is able to rise up. And that is why I don't have proper shoes. And that is why I am living in a life that would be full of fear, if not for the fact that by speaking this truth like I am, that it protects me. Because while there are many who will say, well, we don't want Craig to tell the truth about his family, we don't want Craig to tell the truth about what happened to him. Well, at the same time, there's many people who absolutely respect that truth and that fight. And frankly, I wouldn't be alive today without the probably 20 or 30 people, Brendan, who contacted me in the past couple of years during all this chaos that I've experienced and have basically bankrolled me to stay alive. Because when you speak the truth about certain things, there's going to be a backlash. And there's also going to be people who reach out and say, what you're doing is noble and we want to support you, but we can't necessarily take a public stance. And so I've just illustrated in a completely insane set of circumstances that we all know is real, simply by turning on the TV and looking at what's happening in the United States government right now. It's the same thing. Truth is either truth or it's false. And when others support the dissemination of false information, and then you are experiencing oppression because of it, well, that's how you go completely nuts. And I am an example of somebody who's had to learn how to face all that and then transcend it. And it's no small task. It hurts really badly. I'm actually in a lot of pain today about this. It's my daily life, my brother. It's my daily life. But it's also okay. Because, I mean, hey, it could be a whole lot worse, and it could be a whole lot better. So I know which direction I'm going in. And I know that's not really, I don't even think I gave a good answer to your question, but clearly asking me about gaslighting, you're going to get the response of somebody who's triggered by that. And that's fine. I'm glad you asked. It has to be discussed. But to ask, yeah, go ahead. So you can tell, I'm freaking out here. I'm giving this intense answer. I'm like going on and on and on and on because as a trauma survivor, it's hard to talk about it because if you're invalidated for your truth, and you are punished or you suffer for it, then that is a re-traumatization. So I'm going to bite my tongue now because I could just go, I could go on and on about it. So I'm going to take a breath. Thank you. Oh.
Please do, Craig. I really appreciate the honesty and, sharing the owned perspective and mindset of yourself as, you still are going throughout these challenges that you face today due to you speaking this honest and truthful approach within your life. I appreciate it, and I think many people listening will gain a deeper respect and appreciation for the way that you speak your message and share it in order to bring a more positive light, not only within yourself, but with other people around you. And, we spoke a lot about the challenges that you faced, everything that you were able to overcome as you are here alive and well. Not that you necessarily have the best living conditions, but you have the mindset and the perspective that things will get better and that people are here to support you. I want to ask you, how are you able to learn to love yourself, to find the self-worth, to find the self-belief in yourself, to continue to move day after day, to fight this battle and to continue preaching this positive message within your own life to help others who may experience the same issues as yourself, or just ones that are feeling trapped and enclosed, such as yourself? How were you able to find that light and find that self-worth and love within yourself?
Awesome. I'm going to give an answer that's going to sound very different than the question than the answer you think you'd get, but it's a great answer. How do I do all this? And people ask me all the time, Craig, how do you survive? How do you travel? How do you do everything with nothing? Here's how. Because when you get to the point and you realize that no matter the truth, no matter what's correct, no matter what's legal, when you recognize that that doesn't matter, and frankly, many people out there have experienced massive injustices in their life, and you have to sometimes accept that that's the way it is. And I have had to accept that despite truth, despite legalities, despite fact, despite that so many people know what I'm saying is true, despite the fact that so many people out there, I could name them all, and I'm not going to do that today because I don't need to. Despite all that, you still have to live, right? You still have to be happy. And how do you accomplish that? Here's how. Brendan, I live in a place. I actually have a home. I'm just in a different city right now because I had to travel for something. I live in a place where 98%, I can't factually say this, an extremely disproportionate percentage of people don't speak English. I try to be accurate when I say, so I clarify myself as I clarify as I go. I say 95% of people in my town, my pueblo in Mexico, don't speak English. How do I find my peace? How do I find my way? Every day, I walk through the market. I talk to the indigenous women. I buy tamales for 30 cents or whatever it is. I ask questions. I smile. I say, Buenas tardes. ¿Qué tal? Buenas noches. I smile. I laugh. I make eye contact. I will always put my hand on my chest, like near my neck, as like some sort of like I'm expressing my love. Like I'm peaceful. I find my way by conveying this beauty. Does language matter here? Clearly not. Can I communicate to people with clarity the depth of my challenges? No. Is that a blessing? Oh my God, it's a blessing. The less I have to talk about what happened to me, and the more I can connect on a human healing way, that is my ticket, man. Like every day of my life since years now, and since I've lived in Mexico, which has been more than 3 months, I can't speak to people very well, but they know me, especially in my neighborhood, and they like me, and they include me, and I'm welcomed, not because they can communicate with me clearly or because they understand me, like with clarity in my experience, but because with my broken Spanish, I can communicate my warmth, well, my energy can communicate, plus with my somewhat broken words, my lack of Spanish capacity, I can still convey the basics. Love, what matters, like peace, tranquility, tranquillo, you know, like family, like why am I here? I'm asked all the time, why are you here? You're a gringo. You're like, why is some white guy living here? Well, it's not difficult for a person in Mexico when you tell them. Well, it's because in my country, people aren't always nice. They're like, oh yeah, that's obvious. It's like, yeah, it's just I happen to look like the people who are the majority in the country who are also not nice. So why would I continue to subject myself to that abuse? I'd rather be connected to people who will feel my energy, who will see, not via my words, but via my energy, via my warmth. And that is how I do everything. That is how I do everything. And there are casualties to this. I have hurt people unintentionally via my lack of, I guess, stability, which is resulting from financial stuff. But I try my best, man. And when I'll speak that truth, I dedicate myself to being a beautiful person and how I communicate with people. I have devoted myself to doing the right thing, even if it hurts. I try to walk that path, although I am flawed, and I think it's important that all human beings admit that, you know, when no one's watching, man, you don't always do the right thing, even though you try to. And there's things that we all do in our society that we don't want other people to know about because it's private. Because how would anyone feel comfortable if you knew that the person sitting across from you, and I'm not talking about me personally specifically, but we're all like this. These people don't want to admit it, but it's true. We're all screwed up, even the most accomplished people in our field, if you will. In private, they have things about them that they can't stand. They have secrets. There's things that they don't want anyone to know. And I'm just a guy who somehow had it all spilled out. It all spilled out. And you cannot put the cork back on the bottle. The genie is out. Like the genie's out of the can. And that is truly my gift. That is how I'm successful. That is how this is all happening. Because I've acknowledged and I've accepted that you can't recork this guy. It's out. It's out. There's no putting this back in the box. And that's gorgeous for me. That means I can do anything and go anywhere and be okay. Because truth is not words necessarily. It's what you feel. And that's a beautiful thing that I think most people don't know, or they're afraid of knowing. And I don't know that I had any choice other than to become and live that truth. It's an unusual situation, I admit it, and it's difficult to understand for many, but it's awesome too because I get to connect with people every day based on what matters and not superficialities. And so if you can't communicate with somebody clearly, you have to let them know that your heart is pure so they can appreciate you and want to be there for you, even if they can't understand you. And that's my ticket. And that's what I do every day. Yeah, that's not really a good answer, like to your question as far as specifically answering it, but it is the truth as I know it.
I completely appreciate what you just said. I love the way that you just bring us into the perspective of yourself, and just the acceptance that you have, the courage that you have to just bring about yourself in a new light is so refreshing to see. And I really appreciate you bringing this honesty into the conversation, Craig. It's such a pleasure to share your message and really bring about a new perspective within the field that so many don't have the strength to share and speak about. I commend you for taking the time to really share your story and the perspectives that you have within this field. It was such a pleasure to, learn more about what you have to really offer in terms of the insights within mental health. I think you're going to really love this last question that I asked my guests to wrap up the podcast episode, due to the fact that you've already written your book. But I challenge you to deviate a little bit in terms of this question in comparison to your book. So the last question that I love to ask my guests is to imagine that you're writing a book about your whole life story. So put into all the different experiences and lessons that you've learned. And I want you to speak about one chapter that was a, profound moment, lesson, or experience that you've had within your life. And just give us a glimpse as to, why that's one profound moment that you want to share with my audience. And just, explain more as to, why this is a touching message to leave my audience for this episode.
3 days ago, 3 days ago, I had to cross into the United States for my visa. And as everyone who watches the news, whether it doesn't matter about your politics, I don't care about that right now. This is not the proper place to get into that. I had to walk through in order to do this, to go get my legal legal status, to maintain my legal status to live here. I had to walk through a pit of human suffering on the Mexican side of the American United States border. And I saw human suffering to a degree that it actually made me really sick inside. I saw what I relate with that. Like I'm not in their shoes, but I know what it feels like to be abandoned and be viewed as scum, and to be viewed as vermin. I really do. And even though I'm a white man from Massachusetts, my personal, how I relate is not like how most white men from a nice, liberal, rich state would relate. And 3 days ago, when I had to do this, it affected me. It hurt me, and I'm not afraid of much, and I'm not ashamed of much, because what's there to be afraid of? And why not just tell the truth? Tell the truth. You don't have to be ashamed. You just own it. And I felt some collective shame when I saw dozens of children and young mothers like laying on the ground with nothing, knowing I had very little money. I have very little. I mean, despite my successes, I've been very hurt. I've been very hurt financially. I think it's very painful for me. And I walked through this crowd, like it was the walk of shame. Here's this white guy casually walking to the border. Here's my passport, walking across. Like, it's easy. And I walk through dozens of children, like in diapers, some in diapers still, sleeping and living on a sidewalk, like 100 feet from the United States. And it furthered my resolve to do the right thing in the world, and I emptied my wallet walking through. Not that I had very much, but I couldn't, and I have very little, but it was the right thing. And so I got to the U.S. There was a park right there, and I went and I hugged a tree. I hugged a tree. I always hug trees. I'm a tree hugger. It's true. And I cried. I cried. And then I said, screw this. I'm going back right now. I mean, that was a plan anyways. And I spent maybe 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes. And I turned around and I walked back across, and I took a photo of the river in which, like, a month and a half ago, the father and the little child, like, drowned in. And I said a prayer, and I walked back across, and then I was back in safety. And that might sound completely insane to your average American, but for me, how am I going to make a difference in the world if I don't allow the reality on the ground to inform me? And I must take that information and process it and turn it into something good. So that experience, it's affected me. It's affected my health, my emotional health, my mental health. It's something that no one wants to know about. No one wants to know that this is happening. And, well, I didn't know I was going to see that. I mean, I should have expected it, but it was way worse than I could have imagined. I'm a survivor. And those people are survivors. And I'm glad that I sacrificed myself. The little money I had, I had maybe a few hundred pesos. It's not a lot of money comparatively. You can do the exchange. It's very little. But they had nothing. Those people, those women, little children, they had nothing compared to me. But I have very little compared to most of the fancy people I have to deal with out there in the United States and professionally. And so I have no regrets for doing that. I'd rather starve for a day or not have shoes that I could have bought with that money to help people who have no one help me. Because you know why? Because I've spent my entire life asking for help. I'm going to answer your question properly in a second, sorry. I spent my entire life begging the people whose job it was to help me for help. And they haven't. They have not helped me. And I am not going to be the person who then abandons other people in their time of need. I don't have to speak their language. I don't have to look like them. I don't have to agree with anything about them. Well, I'm not going to make a statement about that either, one way or another. But I'm certainly not going to not do what I can to do something to make sure that the life of a little child is not I'm not going to have a contribution to their suffering. I'm going to have a contribution to their well-being because I deserve that my entire life. I've been denied it almost systematically. So if I was going to write a chapter in a book today about where I'm at and what I'm doing, where I'm going, it would be the following. The lessons I've learned in this life have been extraordinarily abusive. You look at my body, my skin, what I look like, my perceived gender, my perceived class. I know I'm a fairly good-looking person, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to people. Why is he so screwed up? How can our society make any sense of somebody who's a smart, capable white man? It doesn't make sense. And because of that, I know what it feels like to be not understood. And the chapter of that book, I was sharing with the world, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to do so. The chapter would be, as I stated, here's what happened. Here's what I'm doing with it. Here's where I'm going. I want everyone in the world to know that no matter what happens to you, you must wake up tomorrow morning. Let the sunrise come. Let the sunrise come. The sun is the earth's gift. It's been happening for millions of years. And before humans, animals knew that. And even before animals, plants and trees knew that. And our existence we exist because that sun rises every day. And that's a gift that's been given to what life is since the beginning of life existing. And it is that gift that every person out there, who, whether you're suffering in distress and pain, or you are the provider whose job it is, your industry, if you will, or not, your life passion to help people, we can call it, that you're also like me. You are like me. You are like the women and children at the border, and like everyone in the world who's been hurt, or is transcending that hurt, or is helping others transcend. That sun, that sunrise, every day is a new beginning. And without that, we're all done. We're dead, over. And that chapter ain't going to be written. Because as long as that sun rises, I have a chance. Brendan, as long as that sun rises, you have a chance. As long as that sun rises, those women and children who are living in the embodiment of suffering, lost and abandoned by society, their humanity erased. And I just share here that local people here have not abandoned them. They're provided food. They're cared for by people the best they can, just like I did the best I could. So the sun rising allows humanity to thrive. I don't mean humanity like the perpetuation of humanity, like we're humans, we're going to continue to do stuff. I mean, what humanity is like knowing the heart and soul of something, knowing why we're here, knowing why we matter. And so, in fact, that chapter is already being written because I'm going to have a new book completed soon. In fact, while I'm here in this very challenged border city, which is currently has a level 4 warning from the U.S. government to not come here due to violence and crime and kidnapping. It's the most dangerous places in all of the country. Where I am currently, like even going outside, like I feel a little fear. And that's not normal for me. It's okay. I'm fine. Because of this, and this book this new book I will publish at some point, it's about knowing that you're a human and knowing what you can do to help others. And frankly, the Better Days workbook that I unintentionally authored all these years ago, that's now in all these different languages, in Spanish and French and soon Italian and Dutch and Finnish and Thai. That right there is my contribution to the world because it's of value, and my life's of value, and I'm going to stand up for my life. I'm going to stand up for my value as a human being, and despite or in spite of everything, I will be defiant and speaking up for those like me who have not had a voice, or their voice is not being heard. My voice is being heard simply by the fact that I'm speaking with you, and this will come out soon and people can hear it. I speak for those who may not have a voice, and that include, I should rephrase that. I seek to represent those who don't have a voice and help them have a voice. But I do not represent them. I represent the fact there are people out there who have not been represented, and I want to help them be represented, and I want to help them be known, because I know what it's like to be erased, and I will not allow it. And so I exist. I survived all I did as a spiritual being to do good, and nothing will stop that. And I do thank you, Brendan, for the opportunity to share with you. And I thank you for the opportunity to listen. I acknowledge I'm a bit of a maniac. Okay. And I say that lovingly about myself. It's not self-deprecating. It's not self-insulting. It's self-honoring. I know who I am and I like me. And if I'm going to be punished or shut down because of that, well, screw those people, because there's way more people like me who don't feel like they can be who they are truly than there aren't. And so I can epitomize and walk that talk. And over time, people recognize that and they get on board and we have a good time. Life continues. Beauty develops. It grows. And it's because of that sunrise coming at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. every day, when hundreds of millions of people at the very same moment that that sun rises are experiencing the very same gift. And that is what I want the world to know. That's the chapter. That is a collective awakening. It's a collective rebirth. And that sunrise, man, every day is a gift. We have to embrace that. I thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I greatly appreciate that, Craig, that response, those kind words. I'm truly grateful that you were able to take this time to speak with me on the Mental Insights podcast. You were guest number 38, and I will provide all of the links towards Craig's work, his books, and we'll make sure to have you in contact if you want to speak with Craig and just share some of your insights, learn more through his own work, and we'll make sure to continue to spreading this message with you, Craig. I greatly appreciate you taking this time with me to share your message and story, and I believe bring some insights into a field that definitely needs some change. So thank you for being brutally honest and aware and just so strong in this time, as you are still working throughout the experiences that you've placed within your life. I truly am so grateful to connect with you, Craig, and be here with you today. So thank you again for being on the Mental Insights podcast, and I'm so excited to share this message with everyone out there and to give those who do not necessarily have a voice, who are not heard, that opportunity. And I think you did such a wonderful job in bringing the light towards those who are not necessarily heard within our society today. So thank you for being here. This has been Craig Lewis on episode number 38 of the Mental Insights podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mental Insights podcast. Please screenshot this episode and share any insights that you may have learned throughout this conversation. Please like, subscribe, and review the Mental Insights podcast on whichever streaming platform you are listening on. I appreciate your support, and please share this amongst anyone who you believe should subscribe to the Mental Insights podcast. Thank you all for listening. This has been your host, Brennan Cattouli of the Mental Insights podcast.